Hello everyone and welcome to Algebra 2. Today we're going to be talking about 2-3 linear functions and slope-intercept form. Let's get started. First thing we're going to talk about, like we always have, is going to be that review portion. So taking a look at this, can you circle the relation that is also a function? Well, in order for a relation, or like an ordered pair, any one of these different forms that you see right here, in order for these to become a function, we know that the input value has to go to only one output value. So if I see that we only have one input value for this one and this one, because they both represent 0, and they have a different output value, such as the 1 and the 4, I now know that this is not a function. In the middle, I see that there are no repeating input values and there are no repeating output values towards the one specific input, and therefore this is going to be a function. And the last one, the mapping diagram. We have a -2 that goes to the 4, but we have a 3 that goes to the 7 and the 0, which means we have one input that goes to multiple outputs, which means this is not correct. Let's start talking about what slope represents. See, slope is the ratio of the vertical change to the horizontal change between 2 points. Slope also describes the steepness of a line in the coordinate plane. The slope of a hill is its steepness. But everybody always remembers the slope as the slope equals rise over run, which is what they have highlighted in the top right corner. So knowing the rise over the run situation, we must use the graph at the right to draw a line from the slope in column A to the line with that slope in column B. So if we're talking about column A, we're looking at the very first one, we have positive. We need to figure out which one of these lines represents a positive slope, which I always think about as money, because money can be represented pretty quickly based off of these lines. If I wanted to have a positive amount of money, that means that that money needs to be going up. And as you can see, line A is going to be going up. Therefore, line A is positive. Negative, same idea. I'm looking for the line that is going down, but more importantly, down over time. All right, which happens to be line D. So line D will be a negative slope. 0 represents no change in money. We're not changing it. It's not going up, nor is it going down. And the line that's not going up or down happens to be line B. And last but not least, the undefined portion. You can't really think about this one as much into money other than the fact that it makes no sense, right? That means that your money is randomly just spiking straight up and keeps on going up no matter what, showing no time change, or getting completely depleted, again, over no time change. So the line that happens to make no sense is going to be undefined, which is going to be line C. And you can also realize that this is a vertical line, which means it's not a function. The slope of a non-vertical line is the ratio of the vertical change, or the difference, to a corresponding horizontal change, or difference. So we have slope equals vertical change, which is our rise, over the horizontal change, which is our run, which equals the y2 minus the y1, all over the x2 minus x1, where x sub 2 minus x sub 1 does not equal 0. And the reason it can't equal 0 is it's basically saying we can't divide by 0. That is the only reason why it's saying can't equal 0. Underline the correct word to complete each sentence. As you can see, I've already underlined both of the words. If x sub 1 is less than x sub 2 and y sub 1 is less than y sub 2, then the slope is positive. In other words, if the larger number is on the left-hand side and we subtract a smaller number from it, it's still going to become positive. 3 minus 2 will always be a positive 1. However, if the x1 is less than x2 and y1 is greater than y2, so in other words, if we take a look at the top portion, we see that x1 happens to be less than x2, which is a greater number, and we subtract those out, but the y2 is going to be less than the greater number, which is at y1. That's like us saying we have 2 minus 3 over 3 minus 2. Well, the top number is going to give us a negative, which is that -1, because 2 minus 3 is -1. And then 3 minus 2 is going to be a positive 1. And what happens when you divide a negative from a positive? You get a negative number, and therefore the slope will be negative. Finding slope. What is the slope of the line that passes through the points 5, 4, and 8, 1? Let x sub 1 equal 5 and x sub 2 equal 8. Then y sub 1 equals, well, this is the part. It doesn't matter which one's which, but when they give us 1, we must pair it with its partner. So we know that the 5 is paired up with the 4. So our y sub 1, because this is the x sub 1, will have to equal 4. The y sub 2 is going to be what's left over, but it's also, more importantly, needs to be paired with the 8. The 8 is paired with the 1, so the y sub 2 is going to equal 1. Complete the model below to find the slope. Well, we're going to be talking about the vertical change, which is going to be the y2 minus y1, over the horizontal change, which is the x2 minus x1. So we are going to have the y2, which is 1, minus y1, which is 4, is going to be divided by the horizontal portion, which is the x2, which happens to be 8, minus the x1, which is 5. And you'll see that we'll get 1 minus 4, which is a negative 3, and we have 8 minus 5, which is a positive 3, and negative 3 divided by 3 will give you a negative 1. So the slope of the line through the points 5, 4, and 8, 1 is going to equal negative 1. Label each graph as positive, negative, 0, or undefined. If it's a horizontal like this, then the slope will be 0. If it's a vertical line like this, that is going to be the opposite of 0, which is going to be undefined. If it rises from left to right, it's positive, talking about money once again, so we know that this is going to be a positive. And if it's going into the negative numbers from left to right, then we know that it is going to be negative. Underline the correct word to complete each sentence. A line that has 0 slope is going to be horizontal, whereas a line that is undefined will be vertical. The slope-intercept form of an equation is what we've always worked with in Algebra 1 and possibly beforehand, which is going to be that y equals mx plus b, where m represents the slope of the line and the 0b point is going to be the y-intercept. In other words, the b value is going to be the y-intercept. So question 11, place a check mark in the box if the equation is in slope-intercept form, and place an x if it's not. Well, we have y is going to equal. Well, pay attention right here, because if the y is by itself, then there's a good chance that it might be in slope-intercept form, depending on what's surrounding everything. So for me, y equals a something x plus another thing is always going to be slope-intercept form. So we know that this is going to be the same thing as the mx plus b, and it looks very, very similar, so it must be slope-intercept form. But this is 8y equals x minus 11. Since there is a number, a coefficient in front of that y value, we know that this is not in slope-intercept form. It must be y by itself, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about later. All right, and finally you have the y equals x. Now, I agree that this is the mx portion, but what happened to the plus b? Well, if you add 0, which is a number, we don't feel like writing it. So as long as it has y by itself, there is no coefficient to the y, and it equals an x variable, it will end up being a slope-intercept form. The slope of the line with the equation y equals 4x plus 2 is going to be where the m would normally be, which happens to be 4, so the slope is going to be 4. The y-intercept is where the b would be, and pay attention to this portion because this is going to be the entire number, sign included, meaning this is going to be at the point 0, negative 3. Can you circle the graph that can be represented by the equation negative 2x plus 3? Well, the first thing you can look at is the fact that we're going to have to pass through the point 3 on the y-axis, which means negative 3, or what seems to be negative 3 down there, won't work. And the 0 will not work. So now we're in between this graph or this graph. So if we take a look at the third graph, we can see that this is going in a downward slope. Well, if we have a negative slope or a negative number in for the m value, we know that it must be going downwards. So this right here, the third graph should in fact be the correct answer. Problem number 2, writing linear equations. What is the equation of a line with m equals 6 and y-intercept 0, 5? Well, let's write the phrase to describe each constant value. If m equals the slope of the line and b equals the y-intercept of the line, then the equation of the slope-intercept form must be y equals a 6x plus the 5. Again, all we're just doing is basically saying y equals mx plus b, but we now know what the m stands for and we know what the b stands for from the question above. Problem 3, writing equations in slope-intercept form. So in order for us to get into the slope-intercept form, we must set it equal to y. So y must be by itself, it must equal the mx plus b. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this order, it could absolutely be y equals b plus the mx. It doesn't matter the order because addition is commutative. But taking a look at this, we need to move everything away from the y. Just a little heads up, this is standard form. We will be talking about this in the future. But the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the 3x from both sides. So when you subtract the 3x from both sides, you'll end up getting 2y equals 18 minus 3x. Again, we need to get y by itself. So the next step, since we're trying to hone in on this y, we need to get that y by itself. I'm going to make sure I divide everything by 2. So I'm going to rewrite the 3x right there. So we have 18 minus 3x, but we're also going to be dividing by 2. So looking at this one part, you can see that they get rid of everything and they simplify it down. So I'm going to write this off to the side. We're going to have an 18 divided by 2 minus the 3x all over 2. So I basically just split up this fraction over here. 18 divided by 2 is what you see right here. That is your 9. Right? That is your 9 value right there. But the next portion, we have to write the coefficient of that x value, which it looks like it's in a fraction form right now. Well, we can't necessarily simplify 3 over 2 any farther. But the one thing I will say is they might want to bring out the x so that it stays looking like that whole y equals mx plus b. It really hones in on the slope portion. So my slope will be a negative 3 over 2, but the negative is represented by that minus sign. So we have minus 3 over 2 times x. So what is the slope-intercept form of this equation? It's going to be negative 3 over 2x plus 9. Notice the negative, whether it's on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, will always be attached to that 3 over 2x. And of course, since the 9 was positive, that's why it's a plus 9. The slope is going to be negative 3 over 2, and the y-intercept will be 0, 9, because the y-intercept is a point on the graph. Problem number 4, graphing a linear equation. What is the graph of 4x minus 7y equals 14? Well, first things first, the easiest way to graph something for me would be to make sure that you use slope-intercept form. So I need to put this into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to rewrite the equation. 4x minus the 7y has to equal 14. I'll then subtract 4x because, again, when we try to get into slope-intercept form, we need to make sure that the y values are by themselves. It's just going to be y equals. So we're going to be left with this canceling out, giving you a negative 7y is going to equal a negative 4x plus 14. And I'm going to keep it in this order because it is the y equals that mx portion plus the b. It makes it a little bit cleaner in my eyes, and you'll understand a little bit later. But the 14, more importantly, is positive. That's why the plus sign is in between them. And the final step that you must do is divide by that negative 7. So all of that is going to be divided by negative 7. So your answer should be, and I'm going to split this up a little bit, it will be a y is going to equal a negative 4 divided by a negative 7. Can't be really simplified other than the fact that the two negatives will get canceled out, leaving you a 4 over 7x. And then positive 14 divided by that negative 7 will give you a negative 2, because 14 divided by 7 is 2. Positive divided by negative will give you that negative. So this right here is the equation in slope-intercept form. So how would you go about graphing the solution on the right? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the y-intercept. I'm going to go to that -2. And I'm going to put a point, because that is exactly where that point should go. And that's where everyone really should start. And then it turns into everybody's favorite thing, rise over run. So we're going to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to go across 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And yeah, it doesn't give us the 7th, but we can kind of make an idea of how this is going to go. And I'm going to draw a line that looks like it should be hitting the 7th block over. So my line will look very, very similar to this. Whew, that was actually pretty close. And finally, we made it to the lesson check. The final last little bit, guys. Let's power through. All right, so can we explain why the slope of the vertical line is called undefined? Well, let's cross out the points below that are not on this line at the right. If we take a look at the line on the right, we know that the x value is at the 4. Alright, so any of these that have the 4 as the input value is going to be on this line to the right. So we know that the 0, 4 and the 3, 4, because that 0 and the 3 are in the x value, they will not be on that line. So let's find the slope of the line at the right. Well, we are going to let that y2 equal the 1. And the y1 will equal the -3. So again, this is going to be the y2, this will equal the y1. And 1 minus a -3 will change both of those to positive, so it'll be 1 plus 3, which equals a positive 4. All right. The next one, we have the x2. Well, since y2 was 1, we know that our x2 has to be the 4. But as you can see, our x1 is going to be 4 as well. And if you have 4 minus 4, your answer will be 0. The x-coordinate of all the points on this line will always be 4. The difference, x2 minus x1, always equals 0 for this line, and therefore, for every vertical line, the denominator is always 0. Since dividing by 0 is undefined, then the slope will be considered undefined. Congratulations, everybody. We finally made it. It is the end. Good work. Have a great day, everybody. Stay out of trouble. Don't do anything stupid. And I'll see you in the next one.